At the Bank of Antandek, the CEOs are discussing digital banking.
Dec, digital is our destiny.
You said singing was our destiny. Look how that turned out.
Picture this, the world's first virtual bank.
Oh, will there be virtual hobnobs?
Meanwhile, at Santander, they're keeping the digital stuff simple with My Money Manager in their mobile banking app, which sends you useful notifications so you can stay close to your money. See what's possible at Santander.
16 plus applies to Santander credit cards, current and savings accounts accessed via mobile banking. T's and C's apply.
And go.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the PA UK network. I'm your host Paul Rook, and as always we are joined by the birthday girl herself, Kerry Greenaway, and stupendous Richard Clements. Hello guys.
Hello.
Happy birthday for last week.
Thank you, yeah. It feels like ages ago now.
Yeah. How old are you now? 21, isn't it?
21 again, aren't I?
Yeah, 23, I think, isn't it? Or something? I don't think you're going to get away with 21 for much longer.
I don't think I could get away with that anyway, Richard. I saw photographs of me. Everyone go, no, she's definitely lying at 21. No, I'm older, a lot older. Another year older. Considering it's in lockdown and everything, it's been a very lovely, I had a lovely day, so...
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
How have you been, Richard?
Yes, I've been really well, thanks. Things are starting to perk up a bit, There just seems to be a bit of a glimmer at the end of the tunnel, doesn't there? I mean, I'm not too sure quite how long that would last, but, we just have to, the current situation and all that, we just have to sort of, tread carefully, but things...
Well, don't tell everyone about that glimmer, because they might want to wash it off.
Well, sort of like the light of the tunnel has been switched off.
Yeah, for now anyway.
No, but apart from that, no, I'm quite hunky-dory at the moment.
Brilliant, okay.
This is where science has really come to the fore, isn't it? And I don't think people appreciate the work that has been done and the hours that have been put in by all the scientists and virologists and all those people that have worked endlessly and tirelessly in the background. It's not just the NHS coping with the pandemic, it's the infrastructure of scientists that have been working really hard in the background, regardless what you think of what's coming out of that. I think we've got to say a big hurrah to that contingency of people that have worked against great odds to at least give us a glimmer of hope.
Yes, I would totally agree with you there, Kerry.
So anyway, like last week we was talking about some of the 90-odd locations that The Crown filmed at. This week I think we're going to do the other 88, aren't we?
Well, we're going to cover a couple more. We're going to cover a few more, yeah, not many. There's so many.
There was 90 last week, so unless they've blown them all up, I think we've got 88 to go.
I don't think we're going to do them all, darling.
No? Oh, so that'll be part 3 next week.
Get your skates on, Kerry, off you go.
Yeah, gosh.
Okay, so what delightful location are we going to bring everybody to at the moment now?
Well, I think one of the most iconic scenes, or a lot of fantastic scenery that we saw, was actually when they were at Balmoral, the Scottish, when they go up to their Scottish castle, Balmoral, and that was actually filmed at Adveriki Estate, which is on the banks or near Kinlochlegan. Beautiful, beautiful area. It's, oh gosh, some of the photos I was looking at today, I'm like, quite jealous of Scotland. I mean, we've got some fantastic scenery in the UK, but Scotland, it's amazing.
It's just a new level there, isn't it?
It is a total new level. And I definitely think it's a place we should look at a little bit more, because it's quite confusing Scotland's political and history up in Scotland is quite confusing because there's a lot of clan wars and the clan person here and the Bruce clan and this. There's a lot more, almost like tribal clanage wars going on, and that makes it a little bit confusing. And they like to argue, quite frankly. I no disrespect to any Scottish people.
There were a lot of clans about. You had the Bruce clan and the Wayne clan. They all got together and had lots of Batman.
Yeah,
first film reference.
I thought he was being dead serious then. I actually thought he was being serious, right? And the I can't even say it. Ardvariki estate is no different to this, and this is sort of like when I started dipping my toe into the history of this place. It was like it was first owned by the Macpherson clan. Right, now the land has been lived on for gosh, going back to Stone Age, you know what I mean? So you've got a long history of people living on the land anyway, but it was first owned by the Macpherson clan, but this was challenged by the Macintosh clan. Right,
They're the ones that invented, Macintoshes invented the computer, didn't they?
I don't know if it's that clan.
I don't know if it's that clan, or I think they invented the raincoats.
I don't know if it was that either, guys.
There would have been a lot of rain in Scotland, so it's very possible. I bet they started off with bin bags.
Yeah.
Skins, wasn't it?
Possibly, yeah.
Bin bags, better.
Now, so that this sort of has gone backwards and forwards quite an awful lot, but basically it was actually ruled in the Macintoshes' favour in 1672. So this had gone on for years, this wrangle between the two clans about who actually owned the land. Then the Macintosh clan got ruled favourable, so it was them that officially, back in day, owned the land, who then rented it to the Marquis of Abercorn in 1844. So you had this wrangling going on, and then the Macphersons were on it, renting it off of the Macintoshes, but the Macintoshes were saying it's our land, the Macphersons were saying it wasn't, it's their land, but they ended up leasing it to James Hamilton, Marquis of Abercorn. Right. Now this guy is a very interesting character in his own right. Now obviously he's a Marquis, but he's also a member of the royal household and groom of the stole to Prince Albert. So Prince Albert and Queen Victoria period we're talking about here.
Yep.
Right, now groom of the stole.
He was a Marquis. Isn't Marquis a big tent? Don't you mean Marquis?
Marquis. Sorry, I say it Marquis. It's Marquis.
Okay.
I'd fit so well in upper echelons, wouldn't I?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, Marquis, there's a big tent.
You'd do very well in court, you would.
I would. I'd do amazing in court. I'd be like the Essex girl of the royal family with my evil queen status. Who are you? I'm the evil queen.
Yeah. Horns and all.
Thanks on the wart on my nostril. No. Anyway, right, he was actually a member of the royal household and a groom of the stole. Now, I had to look into that because I thought, what the hell is a groom of the stole? Right? And this actually goes back, way back, in English history more than Scottish, right? And basically, it was generally always a male king. It was only sort of later they accepted queens. And they would look after the man's poo and wee.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
They would look, and it was the stole bit, names after the stool, as in, the stool they would sit on to do their business. And they would look at it and judge the king's health by the state of his
yes, go on, say it.
Outgoings, should we say?
Yeah, that's correct. And even the medical term today is called a stool, and that's where it comes from.
And there is actually, I mean, like you said there, that he would look at the health of the king through the stool. There is actually a thing called a stool chart, and most nurses should be aware of this. And it is literally pictures of stools, and it shows you what if someone's got like diabetes or something. then it shows you what someone with diabetes stool should look like, and various other medical problems as well. But there is a stool chart, and I really pity the poor person who had to make that chart.
Compile that, yeah.
It could have even been this Marquis.
Well, who knows? But this title actually fell in and out of favour, and it changed significantly through history. When you look at it, it did change. And then obviously, when it was Queen Elizabeth I, it was like Ladies of the Bedchamber. Then when James came in, it was Gentlemen of the Bedchamber. And then basically, it ended up being somebody who looks after the King's wardrobe, rather than looking at his abulations, shall we say.
And the thing is, but despite what the job entailed, it was actually a very prestigious job because, you would have personal access to the monarch.
Can I say it's a crap job?
Well, no.
Oh my lord! No, that's a bad joke. Very bad joke. Right there. But like you said, it was very prestigious because you're very personal with the king. It's a very close access to the king, and there's a very close relationship between the gentleman of the bedchamber and the king, and his privacy as well. So you get to hear things that other courtiers wouldn't hear. So it's very prestigious.
Oh yes, they were only given to the most trusted sort of courtiers, and it would have been a position that a lot of people would have wanted. Excuse me. So yeah,
that's normally me coughing and spluttering, isn't it?
There's all these computer viruses going around, I think.
There's a few of those too. Now, he went on to buy it, basically. He bought the estate, and he did a lot of the extensions and improved the estate, but the focus was on deer stalking. Great area for deer, apparently, and it was very much a Victorian thing, going hunting deer, and a lot of the the mounts of deer heads come from that period in time. And Queen Victoria and Albert actually did stay there in 1847 as well. They went and stayed at this beautiful estate, and it is beautiful. Go check it out. It's absolutely amazing. Now, in 1860, he leased it to a Lord Henry Bentinck, who stayed there until he died in 1871. But in 1871, earlier in the year, Sir John William Ramsden of Byrom in the county of York bought it. So he basically bought it and then leased it to Lord Henry because he was living there anyway. And then it was empty when he died. So he was like, oh, what do we do now with this? And he was the sixth richest man in England to do with banking. He was all involved in banking.
Oh, right.
Interesting. So he actually did a lot of the work on the house and extended it and improved it, and the focus was on this deer stalking and hunting, basically. Now, he owned a heck of a lot of land, right? He didn't just own that. That estate now is like a third of the estate he owned at that time. At one point, he actually owned the whole of the side of the Kinloch Lake Lagoon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? He actually owned all of that. But it was massive. We're talking like a massive, massive estate there. But he had the money. Yeah, he had like plenty of disposable income. And it burnt down. Unfortunately, in 1873, it actually burnt down. And the only bit that was left intact was the Victorian wing. Which is a bit of a shame, really, because all the work he did, went, basically. Now, it was rebuilt in 1877, and that's where we get what we see today, the Scottish baronial style, this Baroque-looking stone castle. It's beautiful.
They sort of look very sort of Germanic, don't they? They have the classic sort of castle-y towers, don't they, with little pointy roofs on top and stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah, so it's absolutely, and that's actually when you look at the outside in the Crown when they're doing the outside scenes, and the front door. That's the castle.
Yeah.
Is what you're seeing now. That's what this Scottish baronial style is. Now, James died in 1914 and was succeeded by his son. Now, when we look at world affairs, shall we say, it goes through a great volatile time, and the son didn't have as much disposable income as his father, so he ended up having to sell off parts of the estate, but maintained the integrity of the estate. So it's not as big an estate as it was in his father's day at this stage. So he's had to sell parts of it off, but it's still quite a large estate, guys. We're not talking a tiny little estate.
Yeah. It's sort of yeah, and I can see the timing there. You're sort of coming into sort of like 1940, the start of the 20th century, and and these large estates, and if you owned one, they were becoming a bit of a drain. Sort of money was sort of becoming a bit tighter, and if you owned lots of land and stuff, yeah, I can see why they started to subdivide and sort of lease land out.
And sell bits off to maintain it and stuff like that. But so the estate is still quite large, considering, but it's not as big as it once was in his father's day. It stayed within the same family all that time, even to date. It's now owned by, many relatives later, but it actually has like a trust fund now, like a trust that actually helps run it, a board of people. Yeah. Even though the family own it, it's run by a board, so it's sort of like, and it's more, you can get married there, you can hire cottages out in the grounds, they've done a lot of work in regarding expanding what you can do there. And say, if you want to get married there, oh my God, it's a lot of money, but it's beautiful, absolutely stunning. Now it's really, and also they've also capitalised on having it as a film set, which is why it was so fantastic for the series The Crown. But it also, if you ever watch Monarch of the Glen,
that is the house actually used, is it?
That is the house that they used. Yeah, Monarch of the Glen, everybody. Remember that series from way back? Yeah. There was also a film, Queen Victoria, was filmed there. And Salmon Fishing on the Yemen was filmed there as well, which you'd be a bit surprised by, really. And No Time to Die, the latest James Bond outing. There's part of it that was filmed there too. I can't wait to see that, by the way.
Yeah, that's going to be a goodie. When it finally comes out.
I was going to say, release it, goddamn you! I really want to see that. So they're making the most of what they can from the estate that's there, to keep it going and to maintain its integrity. Which is, I just think it. If you want to see how an estate evolves, this is a good one to look at. You know what I mean? Because of how they're now using the estate as well. I mean, this was quite common in Scotland, actually. There's a lot of places in Scotland that get used as film sets and stuff. And looking at this castle is hardly surprising because they're absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, looking into the ghost side of this, well, this was a bit difficult. This was very difficult.
I did warn you.
I know you did, but I couldn't find any that's linked to the actual castle. There must be. So all I can say is there must be, but I couldn't find any directly connected to the castle. I could find folklore aplenty in regards to the local, like not even the local area, but like 400 miles down the river. No, it wasn't quite that far, but it was like 30 miles away, and I was thinking, well, that's a bit of a stretch to link it directly to the castle itself, so I haven't included it. But there's also a lot of folklore in regards to the Fae in this area.
Yeah.
Tomfoolery is linked to this area and stuff like that, but I've not included that because it wasn't directly linked to the castle itself.
Yeah.
But it's worth talking about in regards to the Queen Victoria link, because she actually thought about buying Ardvarich herself, but she didn't want to interfere with the lease.
Yeah, so she bought Balmoral Castle instead, didn't she?
And that's how we get to Balmoral.
So is that how we're going to link it over now? We're going to jump over to Balmoral?
We certainly are. We're going to look at Balmoral itself, because this is absolutely, part of history is absolutely fantastic. Queen Victoria history, if you want to look into that more than we are tonight, is just astonishingly, well, it's just amazing, really, isn't it, Richard?
Yeah, it is.
It's a fascinating one.
It is a good period to sort of like study, you know, classic Victorian period, and and it has everything.
Oh, it certainly does. You can go into the Victorian period. You could be there. In fact, we may look at Victoria next week, Victorian, because we can get into seances and the rise of spiritualism and Victorian mourning and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's next week's show sorted.
So that's next week's show. Right, anyway, let's have a look at Balmoral.
Yeah,
because I just found it really interesting that she loved the Ardverky estate. I can't even say it. She liked that estate so much that's why they started looking for a Scottish estate for themselves. And they saw the site of Balmoral. Now, the actual area of Balmoral Castle goes back to the 14th century when King Robert II built a hunting lodge on the estate. Now, by the 15th century, it evolved to a square tower which had battlements, but it wasn't until 400 years later that it actually began to resemble the residence that we know and love today. Now, you can visit Balmoral, by the way. It is open to the public at certain times. When the royal family aren't there, you can actually go and tour Balmoral.
Yeah, well, you can tour all the royal residents, like Buckingham Palace, can't you? At certain times, they will open it up. At Windsor Castle, I think, is open most days of the year.
I was
really shocked.
I think it's a bit rude, though. I mean, like, you go to these places expecting to have tea with the Queen, and she's not even in when you knock.
Well, you have to wait outside until you see the flag go up.
Yeah, I mean, what would happen if I invited her round and she come round to like have tea with me and then I'll sod it off? So just have a look around the house. I'll be back.
It's an invitation, isn't it? So you don't go there by invitation. Well, you do if your Queen invites you. She's there.
Yeah.
But you just turn up to tour the house. You know, she's not there. But I was surprised at Balmoral.
If I turn up, I want to see her. I don't want to see the house.
I was shocked with Balmoral. I knew the others you could, but Balmoral, I didn't realise you could visit it.
Yeah, because it is, well, it is small compared to sort of some royal residence, isn't it? Sort of, relatively, I think, you know, but even small, it's got something like 48 rooms, isn't it?
Well, this is it. 52 bedrooms, I believe.
Oh, right.
Just to put that out there. In 1830, a Scottish courtier demolished the original tower and built a smaller castle. Now, it rained quite a lot, so that, undermined the integrity of said tower. And when Queen Victoria and Prince Albert made a visit there, they visited it in drier weather and decided that that was what they wanted and that was the site they wanted. And then they bought the estate for £30,000 in 1852.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what sort of equivalent that would be now, but a lot of money back then.
A lot of money back then. Now, it was very small, so it was demolished totally, and they built a completely new castle, again in the baronial style, and the architect William Smith, who incidentally was responsible for Trinity Hall in Aberdeen, designed it, and they used local granite and housing no fewer than 52 bedrooms. Just the bedrooms, 52 bedrooms.
Cool.
Now, the foundation stone for Balmoral Castle was laid by Queen Victoria on the 28th of September now this I found fascinating, in 1853, and that's found at the foot of the wall adjacent to the west face of the entrance porch. And before the foundation stone was placed in position, Queen Victoria signed a parchment recording the date, together with current coins of the realm. This was put into a bottle and then inserted it into a cavity below the site.
Oh.
And then she laid the foundation stone on top. What does that say to you guys?
Well, there you go, yeah. We'll have to go and have a poke around there.
When I was growing up, my school was opposite a church, and Queen Victoria actually opened this church when it was first built, and there is a commemorative stone in the church wall that states that Queen Victoria was here, opened on whatever date it was. Yeah, and I've seen it loads of times, obviously, because I used to go there, but yeah, That she said she done that a lot. She loved graffitiing on walls.
But particularly during Victorian times, I mean, the idea, this is sort of like the idea of the time capsule, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, and even sort of modern building projects today, you hear of the workmen getting together and sort of putting a few bits and pieces in a box and sort of setting it in the foundations just to be left until one day, when the building is no more, people can come and find it and sort of wonder at the contents.
I think it did get a bit gruesome when they left their pets in the wall.
I was going to say, but this comes back from an older tradition, doesn't it, of putting like a protection bottle and a warding on the property and putting like a cat or a bottle full of bits, nails and urine and hair and God knows what else into, below a relevant stone like the porch, the stone, the stepstone to walk on into the wall. So this is like the evolution of that, and Queen Victoria is still doing stuff like that. So I would say this is more as personally, it's making your stamp on the property.
Well, there is certainly that. You can see the evolution from a superstition into a tradition.
Exactly. Yeah, and like Paul says, nowadays anywhere that's opened up tends to have like a commemorative stone of who opened it or whatever, you know what I mean? It's sort of like gone to that next step, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So this is what that reminded me of anyway. But one of the stories linked to Balmoral, one of the ghost stories linked to Balmoral, is actually the ghost of a guy called John Brown. He is a Scottish person, and he's seen wearing a kilt. Now, I had to look into John Brown because I thought, John Brown, who the hell's John Brown? Never heard of him in regards to Victoria. Now, he was a servant, and it suggested, get this little controversy moment, that they fell in love, but the rumours have not been confirmed. But when I looked deeper into this story, I found it so fascinating. I thought we'll talk about the story of John Brown, because, as I say, he is supposed to be still seen at Balmoral, and I wonder if the Queen's seen him for one.
Oh, I wouldn't know. That'd be interesting, yeah.
It is a fascinating one. Now, he was a Scottish personal attendant and favourite of Queen Victoria for many, many years. And he was actually well known for his competence, companionship, and his very informal manner. Apparently he's very brusque. Is that the term, brusque?
Well, yeah, he was very to the point.
Yeah, he didn't take fools gladly, did our John Brown?
No. Even to Queen Victoria, he was quite blunt as well.
I think she appreciated that, though. She must be fed up with being surrounded by yes people all the time.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't like that. He told it like it was. Typical Scottish man, isn't it?
Yeah.
Scottish person, should I say. If they've got something to say, they'll say it in a manner that you may not like, but at least you'll get told the truth. Now, the Queen actually first mentions Brown on the 11th of September in 1849 in her journal. And at Albert's suggestion, took the role of leading Queen Victoria's pony.
Right.
So he was basically, again, like leading the pony around with Queen Victoria on it.
Yeah.
Now, in 1858, he became a personal ghillie.
Ghillie, yeah, like a gamekeeper type sort of person, and who will take people out deer stalking and everything. He will sort of manage the land and sort of know where all the wildlife and stuff like that is to go and shoot, or possibly.
An example of this you do see in The Crown when they're stalking the deer.
Yeah.
And the guy is ahead, stalking them, and loads the gun and basically sights the shot, and then it's down to the person who's shooting the gun to do the shot. But everything else before that is sort of done for them, if you know what I mean. Right. Mm-hmm. So although they're out there doing it, the work is actually done by a ghillie. Mm-hmm. Now, he was the ghillie of Prince Albert. But after Prince Albert died, we know how Queen Victoria reacted to that. He died in 1861, and she went into a deep mourning, and this is where black fashion becomes very popular, and jet becomes very popular. Yeah. And she became almost a recluse. So, it was a very sad time for Victoria, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, sort of like she went into this sort of, dark state of mourning, and it wasn't, for, a few weeks. I mean, this lasted a few years. you know, and it did cause sort of like a lot of problems, sort of like, you know, in government and stuff like that, because they were saying, where is the Queen, you know, but I think she just holed herself up mainly down at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. She didn't really venture far from there.
Well, they did everything they could to try and cheer her up, basically, and it was Princess Alice who noted that the Queen had always been happiest at Balmoral when taking a pony ride, taking a ride in a pony. So she said, well, why can't we do that at Windsor and at Osborne House? Osborne House is beautiful as well, I've been there. Yeah. And obviously, if she's going to do that, she'd need the man who led her in the pony ride, so why not bring him along? The Queen agreed. In 1864, John Brown became a full-time servant, and he put, as Queen Victoria said in her journal, he was however you say that word, indefatigable?
Indefatigable, yeah.
In his attendance and care. So he obviously really, you know, the loyalty to the Queen and his devotion to her was obviously very apparent.
Yeah.
Now, by 1866, there was gossip about the relationship between the Queen and her informal servant.
Well, they would be, wouldn't they? Spend a lot of time together.
Yeah.
In regards to other courtiers, he wouldn't have been particularly popular because he was so outspoken and so abrasive. They wouldn't have liked that. So you can understand why gossip would have started.
Yeah.
Because
this would have been more sort of household gossip. I mean, sort of amongst the sort of servants and stuff, and then it probably sort of filtered out from there. And I know it made the papers, didn't it?
Well, why would the Queen allow somebody to talk to her and her close relatives that way when she wouldn't allow any other person to do that?
Yeah.
That's where it would have started. Now, obviously, rumours did spread, and Brown was featured in a satirical magazine, Punch, in 1866. And actually, behind Victoria's back, she became known as Mrs. Brown.
Yeah.
So this is quite serious gossip going on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and especially a publication like Punch, which I believe is still going to this day, but it really was sort of like the private eye of its day. I mean, everyone would have read Punch for a bit of a laugh and to catch up on all the gossip. It was sort of like the classic rag of its day.
Mm-hmm. Now, a Swiss paper even went as far to suggest that they had actually got married. It's a duff moment. That was obviously never publicly declared, obviously. Now, this was actually covered in a film. If you're interested in this story, check out a film. And it has Dame Judi Dench in it and Billy Connolly as John Brown. And it's called Mrs. Brown, isn't it?
It's Her Majesty Mrs. Brown, I think it's called, yeah.
Now, unfortunately, in 1872... John Brown actually knocked down a would-be assassin. She had 5 attempts on her life.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember watching the series, Victoria, and they always seem to be taking pot shots. But the John Brown incident, I think he literally sort of jumped out of the carriage or whatever and sort of tackled the assassin to the floor.
Yep, that's what we'd expect from our Scottish cohorts.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we would expect. Unfortunately, he died in 1883. He was only 56. And it suggested that he actually did die because he got a cold, basically. He got a chill. And normally, if you got to your bed and looked after yourself, you should have got over it, but he didn't. He carried on working. That was his level of devotion to the Queen. And passed because it got too bad, and they couldn't save him. And he's actually buried at Crathie, not Balmoral.
Right.
But if his happiest times was while he was at Balmoral, you could understand why he might haunt there.
Well, yeah, and sort of his reputation and everything. Yeah, I can understand why his alleged sort of apparition is possibly seen.
Yeah, he's still around protecting the Queen.
Yeah, his devotion to the family.
Yeah.
You know, to her and the family. I think that's amazing. I think that's beautiful.
I wonder what he makes of the family today.
It does make you wonder if he's watching over them at Balmoral when they're there, thinking things like that. But it's quite nice. I like the thought that he's still looking after the family.
Yeah.
So the question is, were they actually married? Is the question. Now, there's 4 pieces of information that back up this little conspiracy theory of Queen Victoria. Firstly, when Victoria died, 2 sets of mementos were placed in her coffin at her request, this was. On one side was placed one of Prince Albert's dressing gowns, and the other side was a lock of Brown's hair, along with a picture of him and a ring worn by Brown's mother.
Yeah, interesting.
Which is very unusual for a servant to be put into the coffin with...
with a reigning monarch, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now, in the diary of Liberal MP, the first Viscount Harcourt in 1885, he related a second-hand story that was told to his father, who was then the Home Secretary. Yeah. So, you've got quite high-standing people. But this, again, as I say, this is a second-hand story that's written in someone's diary, so we've got no verifiable information on this. He said that on his deathbed, the Reverend Norman MacLeod, the chaplain to Queen Victoria, stated that he had actually conducted a marriage ceremony between John Brown and Queen Victoria, but this is somebody who said this, who said that I got told by when he was on his deathbed. Again, no verifiable information on that, but it's a he said, she said kind of scenario, but that apparently it was said, but whether or not it's true or not remains to be seen. In 2006, the Daily Mail, because that's such a relevant source, isn't it, reported a similar second-hand story in which a late senior member of the royal family had said that documents confirming a marriage had many years earlier turned up in the royal archives at Windsor but had been destroyed. So again, can't confirm, can't deny.
Confirm, deny it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And after Victoria's death, this is 18 years after John Brown's own death, Edward VII tried to destroy everything connected to Brown. And there were busts, photographs, life-size statue at Balmoral, which was commissioned by Queen Victoria. Again, highly unusual for a servant to be given that kind of accolade.
Yeah, that honour, yeah.
Yeah. All of these things were said, he tried to get them destroyed. Now, that was actually moved to an obscure part of the estate. They kind of went, no, we're not going to go that far, but we'll move it so we can't see it. And hopefully he'll never find it. So that still exists. But, again, look at the fact, Queen Victoria has a full-size statue of Brown made.
Yes. So in that sort of list you sort of read out of the supposed sort of conspiracies, I suppose the only two you could really sort of take and muse about quite seriously is the Queen requesting sort of personal effects being put in her coffin, which is, and if that is actually true, that is something highly unusual. Perhaps, and Edward the Seventh, sort of like a bit of sort of fuss, sort of like not too long after her death, say 18 years after, sort of going round, sort of removing everything to do with John Brown.
So it is an interesting one. But Balmoral is the place where the royal family feel that they can be themselves. It's well documented that when they go up there, they try to behave just as normal a family as possible.
Yeah.
I even saw a report that the Queen washes dishes. I don't know how true
this is. Yeah, I've seen published cine films and stuff from like the 1960s when they're on holiday because the Queen, and if nobody knows, sort of the Queen actually spends the summer at Balmoral religiously every year. And they go out picnicking and stuff, and they literally just go out themselves as the family, and drive out to hilltops, and there are old family cine films of her laying out the rug and sort of, handing out the sausage rolls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. They act like, as normal as possible.
Well, yeah, they are a normal family, or well, they try to be.
I think, and you can possibly see why the current Queen has quite an affection for the place and sort of like enjoys going there for the summer. It's a sort of getaway from all the official state business she does for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I don't blame her going in the summer either, to be fair.
Yeah, Scotland in the winter, I've been skiing there and it is quite vicious.
Blustery, I think it's the expression.
It's had a
A
cold
bit
again.
inclement, yes, and a bit fresh, yes. A stiff breeze.
And this is the place, obviously, where William and Harry got told of the death of their mother as well. So it's very integral into the royal family. The red squirrels there as well, by the way. It's the protected species of the red squirrel. They live on the estate.
No, that's good to hear. They are starting to make a bit of a comeback, aren't they? I mean, they were quite decimated when we brought the grey squirrels over, but it's good to hear that they're protected up there.
Yeah. And Prince Charles actually has his own cottage up there. They've got the main house, but they've got cottages. He's got a little place up there of his own. And he says that if he sits really quietly reading or something, he puts nuts in like his coat pocket. They'll come up and rummage in his pocket and stuff like that and run around the house. How cute is that? Yeah. He is very earthy, is Prince Charles, isn't he?
Yeah.
He really does love his
He has got
gardening.
green fingers, hasn't he?
Very much so. He's very into his, protecting and the environment and what's that?
Yeah, sort of like
searching for in my brain.
All his sort of farming properties and stuff, I think he insists they're all organic and, all in tune with the natural surroundings. So they complement one another as opposed to using pesticides and stuff.
Which actually brings us very nicely to Highgrove, which is Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall's official residence in the UK. Now, this was actually filmed at Summerley House. Again, another beautiful house. You can get married to this one as well. Not to it. There. You can hire it out for private functions and all sorts. It must cost a fortune, but you can hire it out. It's beautiful. Again, go check it out, guys, because the photographs are amazing. And that's what they used to film as a substitute for Highgrove. Now, the history of Summerley, again, goes back hundreds of years. Its first occupation by the Octon family of Ellingham and Moyles Court in 1653. Mm-hmm. And Sir William Doddington, love that name, built the original house, and it was located in the lower parkland of the estate, now known as the Walled Garden. Now, the original property was actually razed to the ground by a fire, strangely enough.
Oh, they all do, don't they? Yeah.
And a new dwelling was built, and that is basically what you see to this day. Now, it was just... You start looking at some of the names. Now, this was designed by the Wyatt brothers between 1791 and 1795. But before it was completed, Summerley was sold to Henry Baring, who, again, was linked to banking.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Baring's Bank,
yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Again, it was put up for sale in 1828 and was purchased by Wilbur Ellis Agar. There's a name for you. He's the second Earl of Normanton. And this is where the Argyll family ownership comes in. And basically, that's it, really. From there on, it's the Argyll family ownership. And they go through looking after it and, doing all the things that they normally do as families. Mm-hmm. Now, couldn't find any ghosts, particularly linked to the house itself. I found a lot of Summerley romance books. If you fancy a bit of a romance book, you'll find a lot of books with the name Summerley in it. There's Ghost Carp, famous for Ghost Carp.
Ghost Carp?
Yeah, fishing.
Oh, right, fishing, yeah.
Yeah, and they actually have a Ghost Rolls Royce there too.
Really?
Good for the weddings.
Oh, right, yeah, I see. I thought, what, Ghost Carp and Ghost Rolls Royces? Ah, yes, I know what you mean now.
Yeah, I could find lots of references to that linked to this estate.
but very much in the living and here and now, isn't it?
Yeah, very much in the here and now. But there are tales of, particularly around the fishing lakes, tales of a woman stood in the road in front of cars when they've tried to stop. Somebody said they've gone straight through her, and then there's nothing there.
Oh, yeah, that's the classic, isn't it? The Phantom, sort of, a bit of a twist on the Phantom hitchhiker type story, isn't it?
That's right. There was another one about a man as well, standing on the road, again, but whether or not that's a mistaken identity, man, woman, there seemed to be a lot of that going on around there. And at Sibley's Point, which again is on the famous Summerley Lake or river or whatever it's called, is supposed to be haunted by a young boy wearing an old-fashioned school uniform. Now, when you listen to the second half of the show, that kind of rings bells to me.
Yes.
Completely different area, but, you know,
Mm-hmm.
again, it seems to be a common theme.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to see a big cat, there's been big cat sightings around that area as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because it's sort of situated down sort of like the New Forest way, isn't it, and stuff, and I think that sort of area is sort of quite well known for alleged sort of the sort of, well, whether they're phantom cats or actual sort of real cats, who knows?
Who knows indeed? Could it be a black shuck? One wonders.
Well, yeah.
Couldn't find any reference to that, just got a big cat sighting. So not a huge amount. Again, for the age of the property, there's probably a plethora. If you go visit, it probably is one of the things that you'll get told as you wander around the estate. But out on net, could I find it? No, I couldn't.
Yeah, funny, really. Yeah.
Could find lots of romance novels with the Somali name. Now, but this brings us to Highgrove itself. Now, Highgrove, absolutely fantastic place, actually. Again, you can visit the gardens and the house. It was built between 1796 and 1798 in a Georgian neoclassical design.
That's what you need, isn't it?
That's what you need.
I'll have a house and I'll have it in a Georgian neoclassical design.
Why not?
Yeah, that is quite nice. Nice look.
Now, he actually used the local mason, Anthony Keck. He was, this was basically Maurice Macmillan, whose father was Harold Macmillan, who was the Prime Minister in the late 1950s and early 60s, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's originally his house. But then Prince Charles bought it. In the, where are we? Now, Highgrove, although the house is pretty intact as to what it was, the gardens is what's gone through the biggest change. And this is all down to Prince Charles.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is actually referenced in the series The Crown, isn't it? When he's showing, I think he's showing the Queen round, isn't he? And she's
Diana.
Oh, Diana, that's right, yeah. And she's not really too impressed, is she, with the gardens and stuff like that? But he certainly had a vision there. And by all accounts, he's done a very good job.
I think in the series, I think it looked as if they tried to make it look as if Diana had designs on Charles and was trying to be what he wanted in a partner. Because she says to Prince Philip, I'm a country girl at heart, when in reality she was a townie. That comes out later in the series. She goes, I'm a townie and he's country. He spends more time in the country, I spend more time in the town, and it becomes a rift, doesn't it, between the two of them. But he loves gardening. He got that from the Queen Mother, actually, the love of gardening from the Queen Mother. And he had a vision of what he wanted Highgrove to be. And when he first got Highgrove, it was as neglected as they showed in the series. It, it didn't have much of a kitchen garden. It was overgrown copses, pasture land. It just wasn't anything. But he had a vision of what he wanted it to be. Yeah. And I have to say that's one thing he can be totally proud of is the gardens at Highgrove.
Well, that come across in the programme as well, because as he was walking around showing people around, he was like, I want my rockery there, shrubbery there with red herrings and two-tone shrubberies and stuff like that.
And I think because I think Highgrove, the estate was very lucky to sort of have him as owner, because let's face it, and he would have had the means and the capital to actually develop it into what it is today.
Very much so. And it's totally self-sufficient as well. He's everything is reusable and you know what I mean? The focus is on recycling, even down to the waste. He's got an irrigation kind of system that for their waste, going back to stools. He's got a groundbreaking irrigation system that works for the estate. It is so specific. It's like so personal and inspiring. Everybody who goes there, it's just absolutely fascinating. And different aspects of the garden show different aspects of his personality and his interests and his enthusiasms. And he's got quite a lot of statues of a dog, one of his dogs there as well, one of his favourite dogs that passed and stuff like that. I have to say, I love a garden, you know me. I do love a garden.
Mm.
And
so have you visited Kerry?
No, I haven't, but this is one I would like to go to, is Highgrove.
Yeah.
I would like to, because I just think it's absolutely phenomenal. Now, it's also the location of Home Farm, which is part of the Duchy of Cornwall, because obviously they're now there. And it is a centre of excellence for organic farming and gardening, and a wildlife haven as well. So he loves his wildlife. He's very into conservation, is our Prince Charles. You've got to admire him for that, for all his faults.
Can you imagine at Christmas when they pass the duchy? That would be so much fun.
As long as it's to the left-hand side.
Yeah.
You know, every week he writes a letter to the head gardener person, detailing what his plans are, what he's thinking, things he wants done in the garden, what needs to be done. And she writes a detailed letter back to him saying, yep, we'll do that, we'll sort that for you, that's been done, this has been done, but I need to bring your attention to this. He is so involved in this. Mm-hmm. This is a passion for him, and it shows. It absolutely shows.
Yeah.
Now, in regard to ghosts, the only reference to a ghost I could find is the ghost of Princess Diana. Now, I actually think there was no verified sightings and stuff like that. There's allegedly Prince William and Harry have seen her there. I couldn't find any references other than that to it. For me, Princess Diana is so iconic a character, isn't she? That there's almost a wish, I believe, out there that she's still looking after her boys, even in death.
Yeah, I mean, even if they get some sort of activity there, they could just quite easily say, oh, that's Mum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, it is, Charles and Camilla's house, so they don't really want Diana hanging around, I don't suppose. And I don't think she really liked Highgrove herself. She wasn't that enamoured with Highgrove. She couldn't understand Charles' vision. So my argument would then be she wouldn't necessarily be stuck at Highgrove. She'd be with the boys if that was her role.
If the way she was portrayed in The Crown, if that is gospel truth and that's what really happened, I can see why she'd want to haunt them.
Well, yeah, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah.
From her perspective, she's been done wrong.
Yeah.
It's not as black and white as that, though, is it?
Oh no, that's what I'm saying. If it's portrayed exactly how it happened, it probably isn't. But there are obviously conversations and things that went on that they're ad-libbing on the telly, So we don't really know what got on. So we'll never know.
The director of The Crown, I actually watched a little clip on YouTube. They had sort of him, and he was talking, and he says, we've got a very good accurate, we know where they were on dates and everything, Jess, and that is public knowledge. You just go back and look at the royal appointments and stuff, which are published daily in the paper anyway, and there is an archive of that for royals going back centuries. We know where a lot of them went and actually were. But as for the conversations and stuff that are portrayed in the actual Crown series, those are all script writers have done that.
Yeah.
I think you can make a certain amount of assumption. I do find the whole situation, the three-way situation between Charles, Camilla and Diana, tragic, actually. Mm-hmm. It's like a litany of disasters there, isn't it? He loved Camilla. Camilla loved him but loved Andrew. Diana loved Charles. Charles was fond of Diana. You know what I mean? It's a disaster waiting to happen, really. And unfortunately, Camilla at the time, going back to the 80s, obviously wasn't seen as good future Queen material.
I think
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
if they all lived in the 60s, it wouldn't have been a problem.
not if you're not part of the royal family. Unfortunately, you're part of the royal family. It's all what's fitting for the establishment. You know, what's fitting for the family and the role that they play and the duty that's needed and the appearance.
I'm not sure Princess Margaret see it like that.
No, I don't think. Again, another tragedy for her, I would feel.
Yeah.
So going back to Diana, haunting Highgrove, I would think that people go there. There's probably a lot of there were a lot of photographs of Diana at Highgrove with the boys, and you can imagine her watching the boys, playing in the gardens and in the treehouse. There's a treehouse there, and and I think people will imagine that because they've seen the photographs and they link it to that particular place. So it's more of a haunting of memory rather than an actual physical active haunting. In my personal opinion, that's just my personal opinion, everybody. Do you know what I mean? That's how I would see that when I was reading about it. Mm-hmm. And as I say, I only found one reference that William and Harry were alleged to have seen her there, but that was it. There was no details, not even an age of what age the boys were when that was supposed to happen. And, it was very, very... I just think it's wishful thinking on the part of the public.
Yeah, definitely.
And I could understand why. Because her life was cut short.
Yeah.
We're not going to get into that conspiracy, though, everybody. I'm just saying.
Exactly.
So let's have a quick talk about... we've talked about 4 locations where I could find very little in regard to haunting history, in regards to the ghost stories that surround these places. And considering the history, you would expect there to be a plethora, wouldn't you?
Well, yes. I mean, it sort of goes with the territory, doesn't it? You have old sort of manor houses and stuff. You expect there to be ghosts and stuff, but whether they're deliberately suppressed by the current owners of these properties, perhaps they just don't want to publicise the fact, or perhaps they have no interest in the subject whatsoever, or dread to think, like most of us in the paranormal, perhaps they're not haunted.
Perhaps they're not. Maybe they do. Maybe they're just drafty. Things happen and they just are very prosaic about it. They're just like, oh gosh, how did that happen? Oh, it's a rickety old building again. These are old properties.
Exactly.
Things are going to go wrong. They need high maintenance. We've talked about this before. That's why a lot of them are open now to the public, because they need the funds. They need to be able to fund for maintenance, not because they're earning fortunes out of it. They're probably not, because it all goes back into the estates. All of the estates. And
you usually find that the families that do live there will only live in a very small portion of the property. Like they'll turn one wing into their sort of private apartments. I mean, that's the same when we visited Hatfield House, because you only visit one wing, and the other wing is where the current owners live.
And like
it's a big wing.
As well.
You do see a big wings. These aren't little places. I'd just like to point that out.
When you go and visit Longley, I think Lord Bath used to live at the top floor.
Yeah.
So the rest of it you could go and visit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you weren't.
How much room does one person need? Let's be fair.
Yeah. They must rattle about.
When I went to Longley, I got lumbered with the kids, so I had to go and visit Postman Pat World. And everyone else had a look around Longley,
Oh, no, Paul.
I know.
That's so wrong on so many levels, right?
But at least I can say that I've been to Postman Pat World. And I've visited Mrs. Goggins' post office.
On that note, we're actually going to come to the end of the first half. When we come back after the break, we have got... Oh, gosh. Now, we'll go from very little hauntings to a plethora of hauntings, and we're going to fill the last hour with the fascinating location of Woodchester Mansion. So join us right after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK Radio Network. broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
And welcome back to the second half of this show, all about the locations where The Crown was filmed. Now, we can't go much further in this without talking about one of the most iconic scenes in the series, which is where Prince Philip and Prince Charlie, that's it, Prince Charles, went to school. They went to school at Goldstone, but it was actually filmed at Woodchester Mansion. So we got hold of the curator of Woodchester Mansion, Mr. Chris Howley, and his lovely fiancée, Melissa, who basically manage and run Woodchester Mansion and all the ghost hunts that go on there. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Looking forward to it.
So, yeah, Woodchester Mansion's a bit of an enigma, isn't it, in its own right? Can you give us like a little bit of the history of Woodchester for us, please?
Yeah, it's got quite a long history. The park itself dates right back, but I think the earliest history that we reference when we're talking about the mansion is when the park was bought in 1631 by Sir Robert Ducey. He then, through later generations of the family, of the first building, Spring Park, which was a magnificent Georgian manor house, that was built sometime in 1724 and occupied by the Ducey family right through to the early 1800s. They eventually sold the land off to William Lee, who bought the estate in 1848, I think it was. He bought the estate, but he didn't like the Georgian design. I mean, it was a magnificent building as it was, but he didn't like it, so he had it demolished, and construction of Woodchester Mansion, or Prince Philip's School, as the Crown like to perceive it. In the 1850s. Building work ceased in 1870. Unfortunately, William Lee himself died in 1873. His family didn't like the Gothic design that had been put together by Benjamin Bucknell, following on from the Gothic revival architect Pugin. They didn't like it at all, and they sold it to Barnwood Trust. It was going to be a mental asylum. That happened, unfortunately, around the time of World War II, 1938. And so it was then occupied by American and Canadian servicemen for training purposes. They left, and it was then derelict for many years, until we bring up to 1992, when it was bought by Strait District Council, and Woodchester Mansion Trust was set up to run the building as a historic masterpiece, an unfinished Gothic Victorian building. So that's a brief a potted history of the building I can give you.
Richard?
So the actual sort of building itself and what we see today, so at some point it was occupied then, it did have all the amenities inside, or was sort of parts of it sort of complete and other parts not so complete, if you know what I mean?
Well, the Georgian manor house on which Woodchester Mansion sits, that was completely finished and occupied, had all amenities.
Mm-hmm.
Woodchester Mansion, it was never finished. There are rooms in the house that were lived in briefly by William Lee's grandson. There was some final building work done in 1890 when the Lee family, who were devout Catholics, were entertaining Cardinal Vaughan, and they decided to use the mansion as a grand backdrop for his visit. So William Lee's grandson moved in to some of the completed rooms in the north range of the building to oversee the construction of the drawing room, which is the newest addition to the mansion. That is the grandest room in the house, and that was where they entertained Cardinal Vaughan. So apart from that, it is derelict. You can, along the south range, look up through some of the rooms and see the roof above you through the 3 floors that would have been there.
Oh, right. So was it in that sort of state when the servicemen were actually stationed there, or was it still relatively intact?
It was. I mean, it's got a roof on. It's watertight. The servicemen predominantly were based in the surrounding parkland. The bit south was used by the officers as a base for preparing all the planning of the military exercises that were going on during that time period. And the drawing room, incidentally, during the same time, there was also a finishing school from Birmingham using the mansion as a schoolroom for young girls. So the drawing room was their sports hall, believe it or not.
Right.
And it was only recently, well, I say recently, I've been there 17 years now. So about 15 years ago, the floor was replaced and we could no longer see the outline of the badminton court on the floor.
It seems to be a place that's sort of completely in flux all the time at the moment, isn't it? It's like bits are done and then put back, and then it has an overall air of dereliction, but there are parts of it that are still very intact. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they have just been awarded some more funding to complete the chapel roof, which is currently one of the most derelict parts of the building. So hopefully we will see some more preservation work going on there. It's not a plan to finish the mansion because it is such a unique history piece in its unfinished state. It does show you how these Victorian builders used to work and put these magnificent buildings together.
So it's not a project to totally restore it then. It's just basically sort of just maintaining it as it is. It's
preservation of a historic building, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from what we saw on the Crown, it's beautiful. It needs preserving because it's just so beautiful. How much of the mansion was actually used?
A fair bit. There was some quite a lot of the park as well as the mansion was used in filming. In fact, what amazed me, because we were doing ghost hunts around the filming, and to get into the mansion, the film crew had actually built a wall that doesn't normally exist in the park as you approach the mansion.
What, like the gate bit we see Philip building?
Exactly, the gate bit that actually constructed purely for the Crown and then taken away when filming had finished.
Oh, I bet you wanted to keep that though.
Rather good, but unfortunately they took that away.
You'll have to build a replica now.
Yeah.
It's a bricks and mortar wall they built. It's quite something, yeah.
Well, didn't you watch Philip build it?
Well, yeah, I thought they'd probably use, I don't know, cardboard bricks or something, you know. They're very clever, these TV people.
And on the grounds, is the lake there? Is that part of it?
Yeah, the lake with the Victorian boathouse, that is... The mansion has a series of 5 lakes that run through the valley. The 2 larger ones, it's the second of the larger lakes where the boathouse sits, with a dam that you can walk across in between the 2. But there are 5 lakes down there. It's a huge park.
And I want to ask, the office of the headmaster, is that your office?
No.
It's not?
It's not. No, I mean, it's amazing. Like I said, you can look up, when you're on the ground floor, you can look up to the roof of the mansion itself. But when the mansion's set out as a film set, it's interesting. If you go up onto the second floor corridor and look down to ground level, you can just see how these films are put together and how ingenious they put the film sets up. Because you just look down into what we know as an unfinished room, and miraculously they've transformed it into a fully functioning room.
It's all down to camera angles, my dear.
Yeah.
The amount of props they bring, desks, cabinets, you name it, it's all down there.
I'm actually surprised they didn't use like a studio for that bit.
I know, because it's also, being so derelict, it's also a very cold building to work in. So I would imagine they did have some additional heating on the go at the time as well.
How did you come about being the curator for Woodchester?
Oh, well, I started ghost hunting in 2003, and I was living 4 miles away, if that, from the mansion. So it was a regular investigation venue for me. And it was around 2006. The curator at the time, Wendy Milner, took on a university project, so had to resign. I went to book the mansion and they said they'd stop running paranormal events because Wendy had resigned. And I said, oh, that's a shame. Wendy used to let me take the key because I was so regular down there.
Mm-hmm.
He offered me the job there and then, and I've been there ever since.
Brilliant. What I bet that was like, oh my God, I can't believe that's just happened.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Given the keys to the sweet shop.
It was a little bit, yeah. I mean, it's great to spend so much time down there.
So you're there. How often are you there? Other than the ghost hunt part, like during the day and that, is that where you're sort of based?
Well, no, I'm based down there on the weekends. Myself and Melissa will go down every weekend, but I'm talking about normal years, not COVID years.
Yeah, obviously this year has been a bit of a wipeout, let's be fair.
Yeah, this year doesn't count.
Last time I was down the mansion, well, we both went down, it was March, beginning of March this year.
I think so, that was the last time, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it was the last time we've been down there. So it's been a case of cancelling events this year and trying to rebook them for next year in the hope that we can reopen paranormal events.
So you've not been tempted to just go down there, just the two of you?
Oh, it would be lovely.
Very tempting.
We're currently filming our own series for Amazon, so Woodchester is one of the venues that I want on the series.
Well, of course. That's goes without saying, surely.
That's handy.
That's saying, yeah.
Yeah, so no, the nearest we've got to Woodchester Mansion was the ancient Ram Inn, who kindly let us in. But the mansion is being owned by trustees, being administered by trustees. They have to be very careful, so they're not allowing any events to go on down there. Not even for us.
Tusk is all I can say on that. Sorry, Melissa, you was going to say something?
No, I was just in agreement with Chris there. You know, we're really missing the building at the moment. It's quite sad, really. But on the plus side, we're dying to get back in there. So as soon as we can, we'll be straight there.
Oh, I don't blame you. Just to check it over, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. See what the activity's like down there. It's I don't think the resident ghosts have had such a long break from investigation.
Feeling very neglected.
Yeah. That would be interesting to sort of monitor when you go back to see if there is sort of some sort of change in activity to what you might be used to.
See if they've tied it up for you.
Yeah.
It is interesting because when I first started investigating the building, it did seem a lot more active. I mean, it's still an active building, don't get me wrong, but the activity has seemed to get slightly less over the years. It still goes on, but not as frequent. So I'm just wondering if it has been over investigated. So I think the break might do the building good.
That's interesting. It will be interesting to see a lot of locations that were regularly investigated and haven't been this year. It is going to be an interesting time when we do finally be able to get back out to see if they missed us, quite frankly.
Yes.
So when you first started curating, take you back in time and you first got the keys and you was in there investigating, what sort of... obviously you'd be there on your own for a period of time before the team arrived or whatever. What do you think that they were very they liked you being there and looking after the place for them, or what sort of thing did you get? What vibes that's where I'm going. Vibes.
Yeah, vibes.
Yeah, vibes. To be quite honest, it was the first time I went in the building completely on my own. It was unnerving. I'll put it that way. It was an unnerving experience because you could feel it didn't feel like a normal building that you could just walk in and feel comfortable. It's eyes staring at you from behind sort of thing, and a feeling of apprehension that something's going to happen, but not knowing where that feeling's coming from. It's a very cold and dark place, and it took me a while to get used to that. And when I did get used to it, I was down there. I remember going in one night when we couldn't use the drawing room as our base room. So I was hunting around to see which room the day staff had set up for us. And it was the canteen, just the other side of the kitchen. And so I thought, right, that's sorted out. I'll go back up and let the group in. And as I walked through the kitchen, I just shouted out, "So are you going to be good for us tonight?" And there was an almighty thump of a footstep landing on the floor behind me. I turned around, there was nobody there, and I don't think I've exited the building any quicker ever since I've been there.
Actually, that's one of the questions I was going to ask you is, do you talk to the spirits when you're there on your own? Do you sort of like go, "Hi, it's me again, just doing this today," whatever?
all the time, and since Melissa's been coming down, it's been even better because Melissa's a clairvoyant, so she talks to them. I can't hear them, but Melissa can, so it's been... to
anybody else, I just look crazy walking around talking to them.
Well, then we've got to bring Melissa in at this point. How did you two meet? Was that actually on a ghost hunt?
It was actually via my inquiry to book the mansion, because I was running it was a very small paranormal sort of investigating team at the time, and I wanted to take the public with me. And I emailed Chris to just make a general inquiry, and I needed a bit of history on the place, and he agreed to come and talk to me, and that's how we met, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that was it. The rest is history.
Yeah.
Oh, we just mentioned brought you together.
Yes.
Oh dear.
Paul, sorry, Paul, did you want to add something in at this point?
No, that was it.
He's gone quiet.
Sorry, I do this all the time. He tells me off all the time because I forget.
I just get so engrossed in what people say, and it's like sometimes it's like, wow.
So, Melissa, when you first went to Rochester, then having that ability, how did that feel for you? Having that ability, was you overwhelmed by the amount of spirit, or were they tentative towards you? How did that work?
To be honest, because I'd been doing it for a while at this point, it had been about 3 years that I'd started doing it professionally. So it doesn't overwhelm me anymore, thankfully, unless there's something very negative going on, or a spirit has something really urgent they have to say, as Chris will agree. We've been to locations before, but I'm very much used to how spirit works now. I'm used to the fact that I see people's auras when we're walking around. So, even if it's just Chris and I there, immediately he knows if I'm walking off somewhere, then I'm being drawn to something. He keeps quiet, don't you, bless you?
Yes.
While he knows I'm channeling something. So the first time I set foot, even with just opening the door, even without my ability, you can feel the history and the energy in the walls. It's quite, I suppose in that sense, it is overwhelming, because there is a lot you can learn from a place like that. It's pretty special. But I think the first thing I spotted was the little boy out in the car park.
Yes.
There was a little boy who immediately wanted my attention. His name was William, and he said, but they call me Billy. And he was a very smartly dressed young man, about 6 or 7, I'd guess. And he was having a bit of a chat with me. And then I walked on through, and there was a gentleman in the hallway he was very clear on the fact he didn't want to speak to me, but he was stood there telling me to shut up.
Okay.
I bet he was making more noise than anyone.
Well, but what's really interesting about that is Melissa had picked up on a spirit in the car park. This young boy, very smartly dressed, called Billy. Now, I was sat like you were saying about my experiences on my own in the mansion. When the groups are out investigating, I sit in the drawing room on my own, generally watching horror films.
As you do.
And I was sat there one night, and I thought I heard a sound in the room. So I looked up, expecting one of the team who were out in the building to have come into the drawing room. The door was still closed, and what I did see was a little boy stood facing me, smartly dressed, just as Melissa described what she picked up in the car park. So I've actually seen this little boy as a full-blown apparition in the mansion. And Melissa described what I'd seen inside the building, probably must have been 8 years previous. So that really was quite interesting.
Very much so.
Woodchester Mansion is now quite well investigated. It's been on the circuit for quite a while. What are the original? What ghosts or what stories actually sort of came before, sort of like it was sort of like what it is now? Sort of what sort of stories, the classic sort of stories came with the mansion?
Well, the first investigation, the first story came when an American company, Scream Team, some show were doing a recce to use the mansion as a location. Mm-hmm. They were joined by the Ghost Club, and they were basically on the way down to the mansion. The first two cars had spotted a figure in one of the upstairs windows. They just assumed that somebody had got there before them. It was only when they entered the building that they realised that there couldn't have been anybody stood in the window because there was no floor below it. They were on their own in the building. They were the first ones there, and they just put it down to they'd seen a ghost in the window. That's the first ghost story of Woodchester Mansion.
Right, yeah, because I was sort of like looking through, and I believe the grounds are quite active as well. Right? Isn't there a story, I don't know how true this is, about an accident in one of the lakes during the time it was a military base?
Yes. Now, I've done extensive research as far as I can on this. I've been in touch with the American Air Base, and I met up with some of the staff who work there to try and get hold of records. And they do know there was an accident in the lakes. There has been a diver down in the lake to confirm there was a wreckage of a tank. Basically, what they think happened was it was on when they were testing a pontoon bridge to see what sort of weight they could get across this type of bridge. One of the tanks went down over, killing several of the troops. Mm-hmm. It is said that the bodies of those who died were stored in the mortuary area of the mansion. The mansion does have a mortuary. And so people have picked up on an airman in the mansion. Did you pick up on that? Have you picked up on an airman yet? Or
not an airman. No, I haven't. No.
So that's something. See, I generally don't tell Melissa any of my stories because I like to let her.
That was a question I was going to ask. Actually, was like, I know when you first met, it was about the history of the place. So you're going through chronological, recorded history of who lived there and the evolution of the mansion. So it goes back to the 1600s. So Melissa, what's the oldest spirit you've picked up there?
Oh, well, it's quite difficult in terms of the mansion because the one man I encountered didn't want to speak to me at all. So I've had no information from him whatsoever yet. I'm hoping he might talk next time I'm there. I did pick up on an altercation that took place, and there was what looked to me like a considerable amount of blood on the second floor, which Chris said might tie in with something that he'd read or been, Do you remember that when I
Yeah.
said to you there was something bad in that room?
Yeah.
So I don't actually have any dates for the match, and which is unusual. But I think as I go there more and more, the common misconception with the work that I do is that people expect me to know absolutely everything straight away. You know, they want the names, they want the facts, they want the dates, but I wish spirit worked that way.
Yeah.
I get drip fed an awful lot. Some places I'll go to and I'll go, Chris, this, and this. Other places I'll go, to be honest, I'm not sure where this fits. We're going to go with it. And sometimes later on it will make sense. So in terms of the mansion, I can't give you the oldest spirit that I picked up on, but, various other places, there have been some pretty old spirits that I picked up on before. So it really does vary from location to location.
Okay. I know it's I know it's very difficult because it depends on what they want to give you as well as the interpretation of that sometimes, isn't it? So when you're there and you pick up a spirit, roughly how many have you picked up at Woodchester? Because when you listen to the ghost hunting groups, it seems like that there's quite a few.
Yeah, so I think in total now, so we've had the little boy out in the car park, that's young William. Then there's a gentleman who won't speak to me in one of the corridors. And then we've got, I believe, 2 men. There was an altercation on the 2nd floor, so that's 4. And then there's a very, very heavy presence of what I believe is a man on the very top floor. Now, this is something I haven't explored fully yet because Chris had a hard time trying to actually get me up the stairs. Do you remember I wouldn't go up?
Yeah, that was quite interesting. I haven't yet got Melissa up on the 2nd floor.
I actually refused to go up because I got dizzy and I said, Chris, I can't go up there. There's something wrong. So, all Chris has told me, because I always insist he doesn't tell me anything. And if he has to tell me anything, it's normally for safety purposes or something that just something basically that I need to know. Mm. But generally he's always testing me as well. He doesn't tell me at the time, but he's always testing me. After to me what he's testing me for. So all I've got is instincts to go on and just sort of winging it,
So is it more is it a case of like you're giving the information and Chris will then research that on the side?
Yes.
Yeah, or if I know some information, I'll throw Melissa in at the deep end and say, right, what are you getting?
Paul?
Yeah, what is it that's stopping you going upstairs? Obviously, I'm not a psychic or a medium or anything like that, but what is it that's stopping you from going upstairs? Because it's just another level, another floor.
It is absolutely. I've always been very sensitive to energy, even before I started doing this and developing myself spiritually and professionally. Okay. I've always, when I was younger, that I was just very sensitive to people's aura, their energies, their vibes in general. So when we got to that next set of steps, I got about halfway up and I refused. I said, Chris, I can't go any further today. Something's wrong. Now, normally that means that there is something I need to work through, and normally my guide will help me with that, but I just didn't feel I was in the place at that time. It was almost, I kind of feel like even though my guide was there saying, look, you can do this if you want to, she was also, for my own safety or my spiritual well-being, I felt like she was kind of putting a buffer on that as well. So sometimes I'll just go to places and just instantly know that something is not quite right. So I then have to make a judgment call. But halfway up those stairs, I felt like I physically couldn't move and I got quite dizzy. And I said to Chris, I just couldn't do it that evening.
Yeah, I tried to get her up there, but
do you feel that everything you've encountered is actually connected to Woodchester Mansion or what was there before, like the older house, or do you think it might have something to do with its location? I'm sort of talking about the geology of the area, etc., sort of the energy of the area.
To be honest with you, it could be a whole host of all of those reasons, because it's there are so many avenues that can come at you when you go into, if you're sensitive to spirit, and then if you're good at psychometry as well, which is like reading buildings and things, which is not my forte normally. Sometimes you can just go there and you can be hit by, even events that happened on the land before anything was built. You can be hit by any altercations, negative things, very, very positive things as well. People always believe that it has to be something negative for you to pick it up. There's plenty of good things that do go on within the walls of various buildings we go to. Yeah. So to be honest, it could be any number of things that comes at you within a building. At the mansion, I believe that I'm picking up on a couple of things, possibly from the land before much building was done, and also this altercation within that took place, which I'm looking forward to investigating further at some point.
Oh, that's interesting. So, I've lost a train of thought now, but I was sort of like thinking, because the mansion as it is now was sort of like never finished per se and stuff. I mean, apart from perhaps the war years, it was never heavily occupied.
Yeah.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, so, it's sort of... and if you're getting a lot of sort of activity from different sorts of sources, my sort of mind's going, if you believe that ghosts are the spirits of dead people who die in a location, I mean, there must have been a lot of death there, which doesn't quite sort of weigh up, would you say?
Don't forget there were a lot of builders in the mansion during its construction. The Georgian Manor House Spring Park was lived in and would have had a full servant staff.
Mm-hmm.
So there have been people on the land from 1724 right the way through to when Woodchester Mansion building work stopped, 1873, and I suppose a small building crew in the 1890s. So there have still been an awful lot of people there, and we do know of one death during construction of Woodchester Mansion as well.
Oh, right.
And don't forget, when we're talking about the land and what happened with the American servicemen, are they hanging around? So there has been a lot gone on during the history of the park to establish these hauntings.
Mm-hmm.
You said that there was the serviceman died in a tank that was in the lake. Is that right?
Well, they were testing a tank across a pontoon bridge. I don't know how many died. It said there were several who died.
Is the tank still in the lake?
Yeah, there is the remains of a tank at the bottom of the lake. That's been researched. With the scuba team went down. I've been told.
Is there any plans to bring that up?
No, not. The lake it's in has got a very silted up base, and it's sunk far too down in.
Okay, so the estate itself, how big is the estate that it sits in?
Oh, several acres. Woodchester Mansion Trust only owned the building, Woodchester Mansion, and the immediate surrounding track. The rest of the park is owned by the National Trust, but it is several acres worth of land. I would probably say 3 miles long.
Wow, so it's quite big.
Yes, it is a big park. Yeah.
So within that, I'm going on hunting grounds and villages within the estate grounds and stuff like that. Is that a fair?
Well, the Woodchester village itself is right at the end of the estate. The whole estate was privately owned. There was a secret tunnel discovered at the rear of the mansion, which is believed to have come out in the village of Woodchester at Woodchester Friary. That's now collapsed. The tunnel is now boarded over for safety, but the early years when I was down there, I did actually go and look in the start of the tunnel, and it is brick built and full walking height. That was said to run right through the park.
Oh, wicked! Got to have a secret tunnel. Got to have a secret tunnel, haven't you?
Yeah.
Why the tunnel was there, and it's interesting to note that William Lee was advised that the building should have been built in the middle of the park to get sunlight on all four sides, because it's built of naturally quarried limestone and quite a porous material, so it needs to be kept dry. The reason for a lot of the renovation works that are always ongoing is the preservation due to the damp that comes in on the North Range, because he was adamant the mansion had to be built into the bank of where the woodland starts, and the tunnel is right outside the back door. So it is well hidden.
And do we know why they had that tunnel?
No, there's a lot of theories. I think the theory that holds most water is William Lee was high up in the Freemasons, and I think he probably planned that the building would have been used as a Grand Lodge. So with the tunnel at the back, you would have had a secret entrance for Freemasons, which back then would have been more of a secret society than it is today.
Ooh. Not always smugglers, everybody. Not always smugglers, you see. Secret tunnels.
Well.
So we've got this unique building these days that's pretty derelict. We've got a plethora of history going further back on the land itself. And it, it makes it a huge enigma, doesn't it, of why it's such a hotbed for activity.
Well, one of my theories, going back to the lakes, I mean, I don't know if you found this, Kerry, but a lot of haunted buildings with more than average activity, there does seem to be a water source somewhere close. And with the 5 lakes that run through the valley, and the water that actually sits underneath the mansion itself, because there is water storage that is collected that sits underneath the mortuary. So I think water's got a lot to do with the building and how it retains its energy. I mean,
so the lakes you've got on the land, they are natural lakes, or were they dug, sort of when it was landscaped, or has it been landscaped in the past? Both are true. They're natural lakes, and they have been landscaped. Right.
So I think the two big lakes originally would probably have been one until they put a dam across and raised the deeper lake, which the American servicemen were using for their training.
There is a high correlation, actually, between limestone, water, and activity.
There is, isn't there?
When you look at the Isle of Wight, half the Isle of Wight is more limestone based, and that's where you tend to find the more haunted locations on that side of the island more than the other side, which is really fascinating. When I looked into the Isle of Wight, that side of it was really fascinating to me. And then that leads into the many terms thrown around the paranormal community of stone tape theory and water holding memory, which actually, when you look into that theory, doesn't actually hold water, actually. But it does. I think it's more about its amplification properties, and the energy signature of water is actually what I think it's more to do with than water memory per se. But it does make it really interesting. Are there any ley lines through that area, Chris?
There are ley lines fairly close, but not directly through the mansion. The nearest one runs through the Ram Inn, the ancient Ram Inn, which is probably 8 miles just down the road.
Well, they're cross ley lines as well, aren't they?
Which, they cross over at the Ram Inn. So it is quite a hotbed, but the locality. And also just down the road, the village of Ewley, that also is a very, very, very weird town.
Ooh, we might have to check that one out, boys.
We're on a road trip to Woodchester Mansion, possibly.
I've been to Ewley Manor House for years. Most Haunted did it, and then they stopped doing ghost hunts after Most Haunted. Unfortunately,
I've got a lot to answer for.
But
do you get teams that go in and corroborate a lot of the stuff? Does there seem to be a lot of repeating of they're experiencing the same stuff that other teams have experienced and what you have documented previously and stuff like that?
Yeah, there is a lot, particularly up on the top floor corridor. People do tend to pick up on the same sorts of energy. And quite interestingly, on the top floor, there were always mediums picking up on this particular. I'm not going to say her name because Melissa doesn't know this one. There's a lady. All right, there's a lady in the mansion that is picked up on a lot by mediums. and I know her story. And I was up with a group one night, and a girl who was on her first ghost hunt, she was suddenly overcome with a feeling, which I'll have to tell you later because I don't even want Melissa to know this.
Okay.
Because this is another of her tests that she doesn't know about.
Okay.
But what this girl came out with made the hairs on the back of my neck go up, because I'd been told this, but I'd never seen somebody actually taking on that symptom, if that makes sense.
Right, okay.
Right,
yeah,
yeah.
kind of, yeah. But I understand why you want to keep that distinction of not letting Melissa know. I get that. I actually understand that, because there's nothing worse than when you do pick something up, you think, well, he told me that. It makes you doubt yourself a little as well, doesn't it, Melissa?
I mean, I know.
I always insist, to be honest, when we go, because there's some places we visit, we can't help it. We know, things like the Ram, there are plenty of preconceptions about places like that, and you hear all these stories. So some places you really can't help it. If you're a big fan of the paranormal, you just know some of these places. But anywhere that I have not been before, even if Chris has been, I absolutely insist he does not tell me anything, because it's the perfect opportunity for me to sort of sharpen my skills and really, put me through my paces. I like that challenge, it's quite satisfying for me.
I totally get that. I totally get that.
Because believe it or not, I'm a skeptic. I've had all the experiences, but I am still skeptical of, yes, it is dead people coming back. But so when we go and film our documentary, we'll book the location. I will research the building and look at the history. I won't tell Melissa anything because I want to see what she comes up with. And my skepticism has been swayed a couple of times because Melissa's come up with things that she shouldn't know. And I mean, some of the tests I've given her have been very, very, very strict. And there are things she shouldn't know. And she comes out with, and that's not just the investigations we've been doing. That's with my own personal family members that I've tested her with, and literally out of the blue. So my skepticism is being swayed, which is interesting.
It is.
I think that is I think that's fantastic actually, because working with energy myself, I understand that. You don't want the person, what you're giving when you're out doing it is you don't want them to think, well, we had that conversation and she could have read that on my desk. She could have, I don't know, you know what I mean? You just don't want that. You want to be able to go do what you do without any influence, because it's verification for yourself as much as it is for, the team. If it gets verified by historical fact, fantastic, even better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you're telling the story of a place. Where that comes from, we don't know. That's the point. We don't know. I can't tell you when I get information where it's come from. Melissa, I'm sure you feel the same way. You've got a guide that comes in and whatnot, but ultimately you kind of don't know where that information's coming from, do you?
No, I have no clue half the time. And it's, I've frightened myself a few times because, Celine, my guide, she's wonderful and she's ever so protective of me. And she's always been really good, even when I've been in situations that have overwhelmed me. I don't know whether you've seen any of our work at the moment, but we even went to a place not long ago. It's a private residence, and we didn't even know where the place was. We got lost trying to find this place. We were 20 minutes late turning up, and the owners were truly wonderful people, and we're going to be returning soon because there's a story going on there that I was genuinely, I think I started crying because not only did I have information that was distressing, but it was the fact that I had it in my head and I wasn't really sure what to do with it initially. And to have that verified, as you said, Kerry, it's quite satisfying because it's verification for yourself that you're on the right track and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that feels really good.
Mm-hmm. Totally. But we haven't got all the answers, even though we you pick up energy or you pick up information, we'll say, you don't know where that's coming from. So it is lovely verification when you do get it. Can I ask you about the little boy? Let's go back to that little boy. Has he given you any information, or is he just there?
He was there, and I because I love talking to spirit children because they're always a little bit guarded when I first start talking to them, and I've had a couple of them saying they're not supposed to be talking to strangers, and I find them so endearing and lovely because they're, even though they're quite guarded, they are very, very, the innocence even of living children is a wonderful thing. So when I encountered this little boy, as Chris will tell you, I said, "Oh, there's a little boy," and I asked him, I said, "What's your name?" And he sort of looked at me at first sideways, and I said, "It's okay, you can tell me." So I know his name's William. He said, "But they call me Master Billy for short." I said, "Okay, thank you very much." He wouldn't tell me his age because he said he wasn't supposed to be talking to me. And he said he thought he was going to get into trouble. But that was all he told me before he disappeared. He did sort of, after a second of blinking, he sort of moved to the other side of the car park. But then, unfortunately, he did disappear and he didn't come back that evening. So, but I did see him again another time and he kind of waved at me and disappeared again.
Oh, that's so cute.
Very sweet young man.
Do you get an idea of time period in his costume, like what he's wearing?
This is where I fall down a little bit because Chris is the historian and I'm rubbish. Unless they give me dates, we are a bit stuck because I go, "Oh, he's kind of wearing this or she's wearing that."
Well, do you know what? When he described him, I would say Victorian.
Yeah, the word. Yeah, that was my guess, wasn't it? Based on what he was wearing.
Yeah, from what I saw,
from what you saw.
When I saw him, because I do believe this is the same young man that I saw in the drawing room. He was a very, very well-dressed Victorian boy.
Which would fit with the master.
Yes, it would. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a point. That fits with the master. There you go. Another hit. There you go. Yes.
Melissa, have you tried psychic art at all?
Psychic arts?
Yeah, drawing.
No, I've only done automatic writing. I've never done art. I do like a little bit of automatic writing. I find that fascinating, but I've never actually done art. Do you know what? I don't even know how that works. Would you mind enlightening me?
It's basically the same principle where you go into your, meditative type state. You remove yourself from, we talk about putting ourselves in a chair and letting the spirit sort of come forward in our third eye. You kind of do that, but you allow them to, in the same way you would with automatic writing, instead of writing, you allow them to draw.
Oh, okay. That could be. I'm up for that. We're gonna have to try that, Chris.
Yeah,
that's a really good idea. Fantastic.
Thank you. I just got a pen. That's why I asked you. This is weird. This doesn't happen when I interview people normally.
Just send you her pictures now, Kerry.
Yeah, do it.
Inundated psychic art.
It just came to me anyway. That's thrown me now because I don't normally get that sort of thing when I'm interviewing. How weird is that? So right. So what? Back on topic. Focus. What areas are the most active? Is it do you get stuff in the chapel? Do you get stuff in the kitchen? All these different areas you've got. You've talked about the second floor and the hub room, but what other areas are really active? Because I've heard stories of shadow men, or persons, should I say, in the mansion.
Yes.
The corridors as well are quite active, aren't they?
Yeah. Basically I would say the most active areas are the top floor corridor, the second floor, the servants' corridor, which is the back door entrance corridor. The cellars can be incredibly active, and the kitchen. There has been activity around the rest of the building, but I would say that those areas are the most active.
That's quite interesting because those areas you sort of point out, and thinking about it, they would have been high activity areas like corridors, people going up and down, and then you've got the kitchen. So you can that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the shadow people, I think what you're referencing, Kerry, is back. Going back about 10, 15 years, we used to do a lot. Every group wants to go down in the cellars, because cellars are spooky anyway, and they're dark. The beauty of the mansion cellars is there are some sort of ventilation lights, glassed off ventilation areas, which do allow some very low ambient light in. So on certain evenings when you've got the moon shining through, you can be sat in the vaulted stone room of the cellar, and you can just make out the outline of the stone pillar in the middle of the room, and the shadow people have come from that room predominantly, where one minute you can be looking at the pillar in quite a good ambient moonlit room, and the pillar will then suddenly disappear and it will go very black. We had, I think the best account I had of a shadow person, or elemental energy, which is what it was commonly known as back then. There were four of us in that room. It was a full moon, a well-lit night, and there was a square of moonlight actually on the floor of that vaulted room. So the four of us were stood round calling out, and I just said, okay, if you're in the room, can you stand in front of the window and make that moonlight disappear? And just like a light switch going off, the moonlight disappeared. I said, can you now step away? And the moonlight was back on the floor. Now, you could say it was a cloud going over at exactly the same time as I'd asked for it, but it happened twice in a row on asking, and then that phenomenon stopped. So that was quite interesting. It was almost like a shadow that walked in front of this, blocking this moonlight. That was witnessed by four of us, and we all found that really interesting. But the energy of that shadow person has been picked up as very dark. People like dark energy. Well, I think that was a dark.
Is there anything you feel that is malevolent there, as such, of all the sort of like experiences you've had or have been relayed to you?
Well, do you know what? People talk about demons and things like that. I don't go with that. That's too American and Hollywood. But I mean, like in real life today, I mean, you get really nice people and you get really horrible people, and I don't think it's any different in the spirit world if they exist. So dark energy, I would call a dark energy just a nasty person.
Yeah.
And sort of the lighter energies are the fun people who are happy to chat and make themselves known and play tricks on you, make you jump for a laugh.
Do you have any cases of like poltergeist type activity at the mansion?
My eyewitness account. I mean, if you think that stone throwing is a poltergeist activity, well, or an object moving, both my poltergeist accounts at the mansion are in roughly the same area, on the North Range servants' corridor that I said about. The one night I was walking in from a cigarette break with three other people, and as we were approaching the corridor, the mansion's basically a set of square corridors. If you imagine a square, and each side of the square is a corridor, that is basically the ground floor of the mansion. So you walk in and you've got to turn in left, which takes you down towards the chapel, which we go down towards the base room, the drawing room. So we were walking in, and just as we were approaching the doorway to the corridor on the left, we heard a noise, and a stone came out of that corridor horizontally and smacked against the back door, the back wall of the corridor. We immediately ran round expecting it to be somebody playing a trick, and the corridor is long. So there was nobody hiding in the mortuary. There was nobody in the chapel area. And so we then decided to try and throw a stone the entire length of the corridor to hit the back wall. It's impossible. So that stone came out horizontally with force, and there was nobody that could have thrown it without us finding them, because we were instantly on that corridor trying doing that. We thought there was somebody winding us up, but there was nobody down there, and we could not throw a stone to recreate how that stone came out of that corridor and landed on the back wall.
Paul?
Oh, that's really interesting. Is there like any activity that people have said that they've experienced, and you thought, do you know what, that's not right, that's not doesn't fit in with the history and stuff?
I think you've put him on the spot there.
High strangeness.
Yes, many times, but I'm not going to give you any names because I'm
no names, definitely not.
Let's be honest, people like to get carried away, don't they?
People do get carried away, and
fear is contagious as well. That's the thing that people forget, And if they've heard the stories of the mansion, I've been down there when groups have been there, and Chris and I have been sat in there, in the room separate from everyone else. But then you hear some of their stories, and you just think that's either fear that's passing through the group, or it's a group that really desperately wants to be the ones who experience the most terrible thing that happened in the walls.
I'll give you an example. Here's a really good example. There's a very well-known story of a ghost of a headless horse that roams the track of the mansion building. It was, back in the day when we first started investigating, if you looked at any paranormal team's webpage and their reports on the history of the mansion, they would always mention the reports of the ghost of the headless horse, not headless horseman, a headless horse, which would run the track outside the building. That horse has been picked up several times. But that ghost does not exist. The story comes, if you imagine, when you've got a big building project going on today, all the tools are left in the building, aren't they, while construction's going ahead.
Mm-hmm.
The building site is surrounded by huge iron fences, security cameras, and maybe a guard who walks around looking after the site at night when everyone's gone home. Well, back in Victorian times, they didn't have that luxury. All they had was the gullibility of Victorian superstition. So that story came from the building of Woodchester Mansion, that there was this report being put around the village by the builders. There's a ghost. We've all seen this headless horse, terrifying. And that was their way of keeping people off site so they could leave their tools and stop people going down messing with their work.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
So how much then, it leads to the question, either people are reading this and taking that as like a gospel ghost hunting and sort of like imagining it when they're doing it, or it's actually so ingrained now in the folklore and the history of Woodchester that people are actually manifesting it.
Wow.
They could be.
That's your area, that.
They could be manifesting it, but I always think that people panic when they walk into a place like the mansion because, like, for me, even if I get something that's contradictory of the history of the building, I'd rather say what I get than be in keeping with what I've learnt or been told by somebody. Because if that's what I get, that's what I get. But I think groups go in there sometimes and they want to say, yes, I experienced that. Because if they're saying they didn't, people might say, well, how good are you then? It's that kind of thing where, but sometimes I think people can manifest these things. They can draw it closer to them because I firmly believe that paranormal experiences are very personal and it depends on the energy that you're giving off when you walk into the building. And I believe the energy within that building will respond to whatever you're giving out, and that determines your experience.
Right.
Mm.
It's a very personal thing, I think, and that's why so many people have different things that happen. I always say to people, there's no right or wrong answer to what you experience, because somebody sat next to you could have something totally different that comes into their minds. So, it's just these groups sometimes, I just think they just want to make sure they're experiencing what they've heard about. Otherwise, they're worrying that they're not getting it right, kind of thing.
Yeah, or they're missing out on something.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's an absolutely fascinating location. Guys, you mentioned that you're doing an Amazon series at the moment. Where can we go and find this series? Where can we? I know it's on Amazon, but you know what I mean.
It's a good song.
It's on Amazon Prime. It's called "Is There Anybody There?" and it's a series in the making. How many episodes are up at the moment? There'll be 5 up by the end of next week. I think.
Yes,
5
the
episodes
last one's
so
still
far.
running through editing at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
For Amazon. So,
but they're also on YouTube as well. and what we call the Holy Files.
Of course you are.
The Holy Files. So yeah, you can also watch them on there, but the quality is better on Amazon. They've done a better job of rendering it. It's in proper HD on Amazon.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And there's no
on Amazon.
And there's no view to ending your career at Woodchester, is there, guys?
Hopefully not. No, I've been in talks. Do you know what? This is how laid back they are over there. I've never had a contract with them. I've just always run it for them. And due to lockdown, I think the trustees are getting bored with no work to do. I've had the head of the trust drafting up a contract for me. I've only been 7 years.
The amount of I's that are being, T's that are being crossed and I's that are being dotted at the moment is unreal at the moment, I think, for a lot of companies. Finding work to do. So, guys, Woodchester Mansion is well investigated, as you say. It is open for investigations. How can they get hold of you if somebody would like to book it?
If they the easiest way for Mansion is just email chris@chrishowley.com, and that'll get through to me. But as I say, at the moment, the Mansion is closed, so I've got no idea when I can book anything in at the moment. But for general information of prices and for when we do reopen, then just send me an email. That's the easiest for Mansion work.
Fantastic. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to all things Woodchester Mansion. It's been a place that I've been wanting to come down to for quite a few years now. I really need to start ticking off my bucket list, don't I, guys?
No, we've got to get you out, my dear.
We're going to come over, Kerry.
I know, I keep saying it, don't I, Chris? And I never do. But I promised myself at the beginning, funnily enough, beginning of this year, I actually challenged myself to start pushing through this social anxiety that I get. And then we went into lockdown, and then a pandemic hit. So
I hoovered the car out and everything, polished it. I think, and then bang, we hit with this.
I think all three of you should come over to the Mansion next year when we open up.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Thank you once again.
That'd be fantastic.
It would be. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on the Paranormal Concept Show. On that note, we're going to let you go, but thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.